This episode is brought to you by Endless Comics, Games, and Cards. Whether you are a dedicated Wednesday warrior or looking for the latest drop of TCG or sports cards, Endless Comics, Games, and Cards has you covered. While Endless is known for their large collection of both single-issue comics and their library of graphic novels, not to mention their monthly comic book club, they also stay fully stocked with singles and sealed product for Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and many, many more. What's the best part? You can set up your pull list online at endlesscgc.com and they will send your new books to you. So, head over to endlesscgc.com or check them out on social media at endlesscgc.
Hey, this is John Kissee, writer and artist of Dr. Rigby, and you are listening to the Oblivion Bar podcast.
Welcome to the Oblivion Bar podcast with your host, Chris Hacker and Aaron Knowles.
Welcome to the Oblivion Bar podcast. It's just me today, Aaron Knowles, and joining me, is a man who describes himself as an artist, designer, and a visual storyteller at heart, as well as the writer and illustrator of Dr. Rigby. Let's welcome John Kissee to the Oblivion Bar podcast.
Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
I am ecstatic that you could be here. I'm so excited to talk about Dr. Rigby.
Oh, man, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, an honor. It's great company, and we miss Chris, but yeah, it's great to talk to you, and
yeah, for sure. And Chris sends his love. He wasn't feeling well today, but he said, you know what, Aaron, I trust you. You're way better than me. You're also better looking. You're also funnier. And he said, I know you can handle it.
He really said all that? I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, before we get into Dr. Rigby, I have a ton of questions about the book. This is, by the way, this is Dr. Rigby, Tales from the Deep, which is already out. It's from, now if I'm saying this right, it's Marcosia,
I think is how they say it. Yeah, it's a British publisher. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will be discussing this because I am in depth. I have questions. But let's get to know you, your quote unquote origin story. Now you've been creating comics since you were 6 years old, correct?
Yeah, technically, yes. Yeah.
So tell me about your early love of comics and your maybe slight obsession with King Kong.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned, technically my first origin story, my first comic was an adaptation of King Kong that I made for my parents. I was probably about 6 years old, and I still have a crude scan of it somewhere. But yeah, it was just like 4 pieces of paper, and I hit all the big plot points. Kong escapes, Kong gets Fay Ray, and I actually wrote out Fay Ray, like I somehow knew the actress's name, or but yeah, that was, I guess, King Kong was one of the first movies that activated the nerd gene in me, and like a lot of us, it's like, that was the first obsession I had with putting pen to paper. Like, well, I got to draw this, and I got to make my own adaptation of it. So I gave it to my parents. I was like, here's my comic of King Kong, and I've loved King Kong ever since, along with a lot of other nerdy stuff. But
awesome. Do they still have it?
They actually gave it to me in a big box full of other stuff that was actually had mothballs in it. So all this old cool stuff actually smelled like mothballs for years, but I aired it out in the attic. But I do have it somewhere. But
that's
yeah,
awesome.
It's very deteriorated.
Definitely a cool collector's item, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I will forgive you. I don't know if you can see my shirt. I'm a huge
me too
Godzilla fan.
Well, to me, it's like Marvel and DC. I can't.
Yeah.
I love them both. Even if they fight each other. Agreed. Yeah.
Or if they team up like they have been, right?
Yeah.
Even better.
First you fight, then you team up. It's like
yeah.
How it goes.
I don't know. For some reason that scene in King of the Monsters is it let them fight. That lives rent free in my head.
Yeah.
Anytime I see anybody remotely getting into an altercation, that guy pops into my head. He's like,
right.
let them fight.
Yeah. That voice.
But you describe yourself as weird and I want to know why. And, saying that, isn't it strange how being weird when we were kids became the cool thing once we all grew up?
It is. Yeah. It's kind of like a vindication in a way. And I think, you're referring to my bio, I think on my website and this stuff. I was I was a happy, imaginative, weird little kid, but
yes,
I was a, nerd and stuff, but I was happy. I had a good time. I think having an imagination does make you a little weird. Like I was sort of one of those kids, like we can probably all relate, that's kind of more fixated on a fantasy and escapism and just, kind of let me create my own stories in my head. So yeah. And that, I've come to realize weird is cool. Definitely. I think everyone needs a little bit of weirdness in them.
Yeah, I know. I grew up, I was the weird kid for sure. I was, because I had, everybody I know now would describe me with probably one word, which is whimsical.
Okay.
But I just, I think that's just a nice
that word a lot. Yeah.
Yes. That's just a nice way of saying weird.
More polite way of saying weird.
Yes. Because I was the same way. Like I grew up, I had, I was so imaginative, and I think that I don't know. I think that it's such a, a valuable thing to hold on to, because there's so many people that just lose that imagination and lose that creativity. And it's so nice to have like the comic community, the creative community, to keep that alive and cultivate that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it helps. It's a great way I think to just look at the world with kind of that whimsical, you could say, eye or weird eye. That's just, I feel a little sorry for people that don't have some sense of that, the kind of like appreciating the strangeness, the weirdness and absurdity of just your surroundings. It's like, it's definitely an asset, I think,
Yes. Now speaking of, the weird eye, I want to talk about that. Cause like one thing that kind of stands out to me, when I was reading Dr. Rigby, because I do want to talk about Dr. Rigby. You know what? I am getting ahead of myself. Okay. So once you grew up, and I say that in quotations because none of us really did. We're all just a bunch of comic nerds that are still kids. So you went on to becoming a graphic designer, brand design, and basically other adult jobs that focused on your love of illustration. Yeah. So it's nice to see that you kind of kept that going. But was comics kind of always in like the background? Was there like a little like, Dr. Rigby in the background, just like the monsters, like Rigby,
For sure. Yeah. And it was definitely something I loved as a kid. And then I wanted to pursue it. And I did a little bit of comics work when I was younger, nothing that lucrative enough to make a living off of. But I did, it always was my first love. And I just think it's one of the most powerful media because it, you can literally create your own world. It's a great medium for control freaks. You're the director, you're the builder of the world and everything. And, I've always had a love for it. But I think that fed into when I realized I could get more, have more job opportunities in like illustration. And then from that, I got into graphic design and, regular, like you say, adult, like I've been a graphic designer. That's been my career for the last like 20 years or so. So, and I love it. I absolutely adore like typography and everything about graphic design. So, that became my quote unquote real job. But I really think comics helped my graphic design ability and vice versa, because it is all about storytelling. It's about framing and rhythm and hierarchy of what you want to focus on. So it's always been in the background. And I think the two disciplines really helped each other.
Besides the obvious of like, I would say like graphic design has a lot to do with like spacing and kind of like filling up, using the right colors and schemes. And then, brand design, obviously branding has its own kind of, area subset in there. Are there any parallels to those kind of industries along with, writing and illustrating a comic? Absolutely.
I think like my experience in design and branding really helped me with Dr. Rigby because apart from, obviously the story, the construction of the comic, I thought of it as a brand presence. Like even if you notice his logo, particularly on the back cover where he has this silhouette logo, I wanted just his silhouette to show exactly the reader who he is as sort of this anomalous, strange character that's got a guy in a suit, but he's got a sword and a ray gun. So to me, that was like, well, I'm creating his logo. I want everything about the character to be kind of clear at a glance. So, so branding, I mean, all of that experience really helped me a lot when I went back to revisit doing comics. I had learned a lot about, like I say, typography, lettering, composition, designing a book. So there was tremendous kind of cross-pollination of the two disciplines of comics and
it's
design.
So interesting because I constantly make this joke about, whenever we're interviewing people, I'm always like, I'm the newest one in the room who's just learning about comics. And it still rings true because in certain cases, like when I first started learning all the things that went into a comic, like when I thought about a comic book when I was, years ago, I never thought about the fact that there needed to be a writer, a letterer, an inker, a colorist. Like I never realized how many people put hands on a comic before, it gets seen by the public. And then you have creators like you, which there are very few of, who are just like, most of the time when we talk to them, they're gluttons for punishment because it is a lot of work to create an entire book or just a comic itself, like by yourself. Like that is a brave thing. And this is your first like create, like, I don't want to say your first because your first was King Kong. I'll leave it at that. But this is like, this is a big undertaking.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it was like, I had done penciling and inking before, but this was my first time really trying to do it all. My first stab at real writing dialogue, creating a character. Yeah, and it's true. It is kind of it's very time consuming, but it is kind of a labor of love. Like I was saying before, it really is such a powerful thing when you're able to control. It's like you're the director, you're the lighting person, you're the actor, you're creating the words. So it's very cool. It is a lot of work, but it's very gratifying. Like one of my favorite creators is Daniel Klaus, who does 8-Ball, that was his famous comic in the 90s, but he famously has painstakingly he designs every aspect of the book. And I've seen him in interviews where he's very, particular about it and almost obsessive to the point of like, being mentally ill. But it's just, that's part of the fun of it. You gotta really dig in and kind of take control. And so, it took a long time, but I feel like it was worth it.
Absolutely. No, I am in awe, especially like, again, we've talked to several creators, like Michael Dialinas, who did Zawa, is, again, he talked about, when we interviewed him, he talked about the process of learning how to, because he went to the people that he knew. He went to the subject matter experts and he talked to them about, okay, what is your advice on inking, on lettering? And I was just like, it was so, I don't even know the word right now, but it was impressive. It's I don't know. I think it's kind of a beautiful thing, to be able to kind of reach into the community that you are somewhat competitive against, but at the same time really does like kind of support each other and create these like beautiful things. So
I found that the comics community, all from professionals to all aspects, you guys, like people that report on it, and like it's very generous, I think. And it's true that you don't really know what you really have to start it and get into it, because you can think about it a lot and think about technique, and you just don't know until you start it. And it often becomes something different, certainly, than what you intended, and probably for the better. But you just got to get in and start it. Yeah.
Well, let's get in and get started and talk about Dr. Rigby, because man, wow. So the summation, or I guess the summary is: impeccably dressed and wielding strange weapons, Dr. Rigby is a mysterious soldier in an ancient secret war of magic, monsters, and cosmic madness. And my God, is that a perfect summation of Dr. Rigby? But at the same time, it does not touch on all that they are. So the gentleman, the warrior, the quote unquote man. Talk to me about where he came from, about who or what he is. Of course, without spoilers, but let's get into who and where Dr. Rigby came from and is.
Yeah, well, so the characters, he started out purely visual. Like I say, I had done comics years ago and wanted to revisit it. And so I kind of gave myself this exercise along with a couple friends of mine and I that were in the same boat. We loved comics and we were like, let's just do our own comics and proceed as if we've been given the green light to do whatever we want. No constraints, no thought of a deadline, no worry about a publisher, thinking maybe we'd put it on Comixology, but that wasn't part of, we were just like, let's start and make our own thing,
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, it ended up being this strange mashup of like Lovecraft style cosmic horror and kind of retro 60s era James Bond, which I've always loved, that kind of 60s spy adventure, the style, the aesthetic of that,
Mm-hmm.
That kind of look. And yeah, out of that emerged just this, again, purely visual. At first, this guy in a really sharp suit, but then he's wielding a sword. And I was like, I'm going to give him a ray gun too, like a Flash Gordon ray gun. So the idea was he really is this mashup of almost like, James Bond meets H.P. Lovecraft meets Conan the Barbarian or Flash Gordon. A touch of everything in this strange character. And it ended up being a kind of almost in the way that Mike Mignola does in Hellboy, who's one of my heroes, obviously a big inspiration in this, but he sort of created a character in a world where he could crowbar, sort of shoehorn in a lot of other cool things into this universe that's full of strange things. So it's almost like he's this protagonist that enters these very strange worlds that can vary a lot in tone, from sci-fi to Lovecraft horror. And that was pretty much his origin. But then the more I kind of wrote the character, he took on more of a personality and life of his own. Like, I really thought it would be cool if he was more of a mixture of like James Bond and Mr. Spock, like arguably two of the coolest characters from the 60s. So on the one hand, he's suave, handsome, capable Bond-like quality, but he's not witty or charming. He's like serious and completely aloof, strange, otherworldly weirdo. So I like, the more I wrote him, I kind of really enjoyed toying with the strangeness of the character. And it's in the 60s, but he's much older than he looks. So he speaks in this almost like stilted New England Gothic way, which is another wrinkle in the story. So, it just became the more I wrote and the more effort and thought I put behind it, the more it sort of took on a weird life of its own.
Yeah, no, I love that description of the James Bond, Conan. He also reminds me of, he reminds me of the guy that hosted, not the Outer Limits. What was
Twilight Zone?
The Twilight Zone. He reminds me of the host of the Twilight Zone, and I'm just like, and every time I see him on the screen, and it's so cool because he has this, it's so, okay, again, I'm going to gush a little bit because I love the fact that every time I talk to a new creator, every time I read a new comic book, I feel like I'm discovering these powers that the art of comic, I guess, comic, I don't know what you call it, but the art of comics they have this power. And like, I can just feel like this almost power from him, and he just has this presence, and it's so incredible because he's just very serious, but at the same time, he has this almost Indiana Jones like quality where he's like investigating. And again, I like his dialogue because it's old, and then people make fun of it, and it's just, it's great. It's so like,
too. Yeah,
it's interactive, but at the same time, it's like you're so curious as to who and what and where this guy came from. And, again, I'm going to ask more stuff later on about, his past. And feel free not to answer and feel free to answer whatever you want to answer about
Sure,
it. But
yeah.
I love, again, everything is so fitting, especially like you mentioned the art. Like the art to me reminds me of, you know, I'm a huge fan of Lost in Space.
Yeah.
So the old Lost in Space comics, it has that pulpy, it has that visual, like visceral, but at the same time, they're like exactly like you described it. It has the horror elements, it has the fantasy elements, and the locations. Like it's amazing.
Oh, cool, man. I'm so glad it's exactly what I wanted people to get out of it. So I'm really pleased that you did. But yeah, that's what I was going for. They kind of like kind of a fun vibe of the 60s, that adventure, but also with some pretty horrific twists in it. You know, like I was inspired by certainly old Twilight Zone episodes and like Hitchcock films where I wanted to have that kind of classy kind of look where everyone kind of looked cool and, you know, the dialogue was very sharp. And so, yeah, that's totally what I was aiming for.
The one thing that I really enjoyed that I wanted to compliment you on also is it reminds me also of when Doctor Who was still good.
Oh, thanks. That's high praise. Appreciate it.
There is no problem. There's this it's the issue where he's stuck in the van with the Vorvan.
What did I call them? It was based on the old Buck Rogers.
The Vorvan.
So Vorvan. Yeah. Which is a nod to the space vampire Buck Rogers. It's full of Easter eggs. Yeah.
Let's talk about that later too.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah,
they're vampires, but yeah.
The one thing I loved about that is, and the way that you wrote it is the fact, you know, and again, no spoilers, but he's not just the spotlight is not just on Dr. Rigby.
Yeah.
You know, like their characters have their own, again, presence, their own ideas, their own methods of solving things, and I find that to be like such an endearing quality in I call them companions because again it reminds me of like Doctor Who.
Yeah, right. The story sort of becomes a little bit more about them, and yeah, man, thanks for noticing that because that is particularly with that story, that vampire story. I wanted, you know, it's always easy to just have the hero do something, slay the monster, whatever, you know, but I wanted in those stories to have Rigby maybe bring out something in another character that is a surprising power that gives them the power of the protagonist. And particularly in this story, this character that I'm really fond of, this woman Enid, who's trapped in the van with Rigby and this other character. She begins the story as comic relief. In fact, I based her on the old Mrs. Kravitz from Bewitched, kind of this silly, nosy, hysterical neighbor. And she's just comic relief at the beginning, but then she becomes the unlikely sort of hero of the story. And I wanted there to be kind of this bait and switch that I like in a lot of stories where you're set up to think it's going to be in your face horror or kind of funny. And then you're hit with like a real emotional gut punch. And I really wanted to do that in this story. So yeah,
nailed it.
Thanks for noticing.
No, I'll just a brief breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience real quick. You guys, if you like, again, this is like very anthology feeling. It's very, it has the twists that you don't expect, but it has the twists that you want. And it has I'm going to say the faux background that alludes you to, it brings you into the story and you think you're going to be like brought into this deep well of information and you want more, but it's like the story gets wrapped up really nicely and it's like, but I need more. So you guys got to pick this book up, but let's keep talking about that. Cause one thing I wanted to ask about, and I don't know if you can reveal anything about it, but can you give us any information? In Dr. Rigby, there is this weird war that keeps being alluded to. Are we going to get any insight, or can you give us any insight? Will we eventually get more insight on what this dimensional clashing, world colliding, gods with an H event is?
Yes, and the only problem is, like you mentioned before, is time and my ability to complete it. I have many stories in the pipeline, and there is a very specific origin for Dr. Rigby and and an expansion and an ultimate conclusion of what's called the Weird War. But yeah, it's all sort of hinted in there. And I did, in a way, it's sort of a cheat, a plot device where I knew I didn't have a lot of pages and a lot of time to tell the story. So I did this gimmick of like bringing the reader in as though they're in the middle of a very long story where this character is sort of bringing you up to speed quickly, when really it's just the first story with this character. So in that way, it's a kind of a fun cheat where you're like implying this much, much deeper world than you're able to actually depict. But you can just show little, like you say, glimpses of it that are intriguing enough for you to be like, well, what's going on there? And another big inspiration for me was X-Files, because
yes,
they had a very fun Monster of the Week kind of format, which could vary differently in tone from episode to episode. But then through that was this kind of long, slow burn mystery about the entire, and in this case, Dr. Rigby, it's like, who is he? Like, who is he really? And I want to give the reader the impression that he's not really being completely honest with the reader. It's like, he's an unreliable narrator. So
yes,
there's more to him than even he's revealing, in his narration.
He reminds me a little bit, and I forget his name, but there's like the dad to the Umbrella Academy.
Oh yeah, right.
Reginald, I think.
Reginald Hargreaves.
Hargreaves. Yeah. See, that was teamwork. He reminds me of that, and then also like you mentioned earlier, like Hellboy, and the way that Mike Mignola and tells those stories. And again, like you have created something here that, to me, like is comparative to that, because I would love, again, it's the same thing. Like I love the fact that Hellboy has these like origins, has these monsters, these dimensions, these troll markets, but I also love the fact that Dr. Rigby has, like, you don't know where he's going to pop up next. It's almost like, you're watching Supernatural and the brothers are driving into Ohio this week, and they're driving into New York this week, and it's like, I want to know where Dr. Rigby's going to be at next week. And then you also have, you have the element of, he's got this ray gun that he helped create with Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, he was friends with.
Yeah, he was friends with him, and that reminds me of Warehouse 13, which was an amazing show, another anthology / episodic thing. But again, I could gush all day about Dr. Rigby, but people need to go pick this book up, find it online everywhere.
Oh, man.
It is amazing, but. I still have more questions. One more is I wanted to ask you about this is actually posted a while back on your Instagram. There was a short story I guess you were working on called Seeing Things.
Yeah.
Where can I find this? Like
No, it's a story that I started as a pitch for an anthology and never finished. But I just had those pages and really loved them. And I actually was considering sort of shoehorning them into like in that story into a backup story of Rigby if I do some more. Like maybe he has his main story and then there's some other kind of like EC kind of different one-off stories. So yeah, hopefully that story just has a few more pages to be complete, but I'm glad you enjoyed it because it's actually a very personal story to me. It's sort of about imagination and this sort of the metaphor of just growing old and kind of, thanks for picking up on that. Cause it's one of those things I do intend to finish, but
I was going to say the story kind of reminds me of, and I was going to say the Marcy Davenport, like it could be almost a prequel for Marcy Davenport.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Who is one of the main characters in one of the stories in Dr. Rigby. So again, people go check it out. But that's kind of it for what I have for the questions for right now. I want to thank you so much, John, for being here today.
Thank you.
But before we go though, I want to hand over the mic to you. If there's anything that you wanted that we missed that you wanted to highlight, anything you got coming up.
Yeah, nothing really coming up. Just please check out the book. I have, like I say, I'm really chomping at the bit with more stories in the works with this character and this world, which I think will be surprising in many ways. And yeah, just that's it. I just hope people enjoy the book. It's definitely it's quirky. But it's definitely something that I put a lot of love and passion. It's a lot of nostalgia, a lot of adventure. Hopefully, something for everybody. So
absolutely, I think people once they get their hands on this thing, they're going to fall in love with it, and they're going to be dying for more. But yeah, again, sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now. One thing I like. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. And scene.
One thing we like to ask all of our visitors, our visiting creators, before they leave the show is, what are you currently loving on? And it could be a movie, a comic, a show, a game, a freaking musical, if that's what you love. What is your current obsession?
I mean, I hate to be cliche but it just ended Andor. I really am like kind of reeling from how cool and complex and watchable it was. Like we were talking earlier about my nerdy friends and I just can sit for like a couple hours with a couple of drinks and talk about this scene or that scene. But yeah, I mean that, and I don't know. I love Death and Robots is always a great show to just pick any. Gosh, I don't know.
Surprising that you like anthologies,
Well, right. Well, that's why it's like gives you a lot of narrative freedom. You can jump from one story to another.
Yeah. I love Death and Robots. Black Mirror is one of my favorites. It's on there.
Yeah.
I have not watched Andor yet. I need to, because I actually really loved, Rebel One. Yeah. And that was probably one of my favorite Star Wars movies ever. So I definitely need to get started on that. And also, I have a huge crush on Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka.
Ahsoka.
So I need to go watch that.
Yeah, that's a cool show too.
But yeah, I appreciate it again. Thank you for being here. Before we let you go, one last thing is, how can listeners follow your career? Where can they find you? And then where do you recommend they go pick up Dr. Rigby from?
Yeah, well, you can get Dr. Rigby at many different places. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it through the publisher, Marcosia. If you just do a Google search on it, I wish I had handy my link, but I guess we can post those later through the map.
Oh yeah, it's in our transcripts, and we'll be sharing it on our socials as well. So have no fear, listeners. We will have those links not only in our show notes, but in the actual notes that when you're clicking play on the episode, you'll find it there. So
yeah, great. Well, and I don't have much of a social media presence, but you can find me on Blue Sky at my name, John Kissee, John_Kissee, and the same thing on Instagram. So I'm on those two platforms. You can see more of my work there. And I do have a portfolio website, which is my name, johnkissee.com. You can see all or most of my comics work and some of my other graphic design work that I've done. That's where I am. So
awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being here. Appreciate your time. And again, we're gonna shout from the rooftops, the mountaintops, and from the heavens. Like, people go pick up Dr. Rigby. It is an amazing ride. And thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you, Aaron, man. I really appreciate it. And best to Chris. You guys are great. Pleasure to be here.